Welcome back. But before I get into chapter 6, there is something else I need to say, and hopefully this is it. But I'm going to try to keep the videos to a minimum of 30 minutes or less. Okay, now let's get into chapter 6. Ruth. Tucked in the back of my locker at work is a green spiral notebook. It's so old, the once crisp page edges have turned to velvet. There's a blank box on the cover for my name. Instead of mine, I scribbled for Catherine Sterling. I've made sure to put the notebook in a place someone will eventually discover should something happen to me. The only problem is every page is blank. Okay. I've been carrying it around ever since I left home, intending to write down my story for so long. But every time I try to begin, my pen refuses to move across the page. Now I have no choice. I only hope I haven't waited too long. Sam's is fairly quiet at the moment. The electric register beeps as the cashier rings up a man's check, and then the bell over the door sounds as he exits. In the kitchen, the cooks are slicing tomatoes and stacking individual leaves of lettuce like playing cards in silver bins, preparing for the next wave of customers. My shift is over and I've closed out all my checks, but I'm not ready to leave yet. Catherine is still at work. She told me she's planning to let her supervisor know she isn't going to move to Baltimore after all. She'll stay by my side. I didn't even have to ask. I sense eyes on me and I look up to catch a guy perched on one of the counter stools staring. Then I feel dampness on my cheek. I wipe away my tears and whisper, allergies. I turn and walk down the hallway adjacent to the kitchen, heading past the restrooms into the small employee room. The combination to my locker is Catherine's birthday. I take out my notebook and sit down heavily on the lone chair in the room. I've thought through what I need to tell my daughter countless times. I've replayed certain scenes from my past so often, it feels as if I've implanted them in the grooves of my mind. The details I need to share with Catherine are as familiar to me as if they unspooled just last week instead of nearly 25 years ago. Once I unclip a pen from my apron pocket and finally begin to write, it's as if I've stored the words in a memory cloud and they're now gently raining down on me. It makes the task I've dreaded for so long as simple as taking dictations. Okay, hold on one second, y'all. Y'all ready for this? We getting some info. I've been thinking about where to begin, and I guess I'll start with the day I met you. See, I'm already getting tripped up. He isn't your dad. A father changes your diapers and teaches you how to ride a bike and reads you story. He never did any of that. James. His name is James. I met him on the hottest day of the year in August, right at the start of my junior year of high school. The main thing you need to know about my high school is that socially, it was run by a queen bee named Brittany. Her mom was the ringleader of the school moms. Apple from the tree and all that. Brittany and I were friends up until the 9th grade when I grew boobs first and got asked to the homecoming dance before she did. Brittany didn't authorize that turn of events, and next thing I knew, I was uninvited to a group sleepover at her house. I didn't mind all of that. Being Brittany's friend was a lot of work. There were rules involved. You had to love Madonna, but not Whitney Houston. You were required to sit at a certain table in the lunchroom. For some reason, wearing a sweatshirt inside out was a thing. Brittany did it one day, then the next day, so did half the girls in our class. Brittany might have been content to quietly exile me, but there was one thing she didn't authorize. I was the best dancer on our school pom squad. You know how some people can hear a song once and play it back on the piano? It's like that with me and dancing. I don't even have to think about it. My body just mimics whatever moves I see and comes up with new ones all on its own. Did I mention Brittany was on the team too? So were her wannabes. And of course, Brittany's mom, Mrs. Davis, was the parent liaison for the team. Mrs. Davis organized the fundraisers that paid for our trip to the state competitions and sat in the bleachers with her goggles of hangers on at practices and games. On that blistering hot mid-August afternoon, there wasn't a single cloud in the sky, and sweat molded my t-shirt to my body. We had to try out every year, even if we were on the team the previous year. Because our coach was out of maternity leave, Mr. Franklin, who was our school music teacher, had been pressured by the principal to take over as interim coach. Mr. Franklin didn't seem very happy about it. Over the summer, I taught myself to do an aerial. That's a no-hand cartwheel, so I threw one into my performance. A few girls clapped when I did, then stopped abruptly, like they suddenly remembered they weren't supposed to. When tryouts ended, I went to grab my water bottle from where I tossed it onto the edge of the bright green turf. My mouth was so dry it hurt. I uncapped the bottle and tilted my head back, desperate to gulp down some water. Nothing came out. I dropped my empty bottle and walked back to rejoin the others, a smile on my face. I never gave Brittany the satisfaction of a reaction. I didn't do it whenever I found the word slut written in lipstick across my locker, or got summoned to the principal's office because he'd been told I was selling weed, or overheard Brittany stage whispering to her lunch table that my mother was a drunk. That one was true, by the way. My mom, your grandma, was usually half in the bag by the time she finished her lunchtime wine, which is why I got a used car for my 16th birthday. My dad didn't want her driving me or my little brother Timmy when she was under the influence, so I was the one who took us to and from school. More on that later, though. I stood at the edge of the pack of girls who tried out, dizzy from dehydration in the blazing sun, listening as Coach read out the names of everyone who made the varsity team. It was just a formality. 5 girls who'd been on the team last year had graduated, and the best 5 girls from JV were going to move up. There were 12 spots on the varsity squad in total. Still, every time Coach called out a name, Brittany squealed and threw her arms around the girls like they both won the lottery. Coach went through 8 names alphabetically, then got to the spot where my name should have been. He called someone else's instead. I took a half step forward, a protest rising in my throat. Don't react, my mind commanded. It held me back a milliseconds before I spoke. I decided to wait, to let things play out. If Brittany and Mrs. Davis and Coach Franklin, who I was already convinced was half in love with Miss Davis, judging from the way he kept sneaking looks at her, were trying to have me cut from the team, I'd find a way to fight it. I couldn't do it here, not when I was so outnumbered. Coach called the 10th name. The girl next to me turned to stare. I couldn't tell if she was innocent or in on it. She was one of the JV girls who was moving up, which meant Brittany probably hadn't gotten her claws into her yet. But just to be safe, I avoided her eyes and kept my face expressionless. We were nearing the end of the alphabet. Coach announced the 11th name. It wasn't mine. Brittany's squeal seemed even louder this time. My cheeks were burning in a way that had nothing to do with the sun. I could hear a few girls murmuring, but I wasn't close enough to understand what they were saying. Coach banged his clipboard against his leg and told us that anyone who didn't make varsity would be considered for JV. He said if we were on the varsity squad, we could stay put. Everyone else could leave. The girls who didn't make it gathered their things and began to climb the bleachers. Brittany tilted back her neck and sipped from her water bottle, watching me from beneath her eyelashes. I wasn't going to retreat. If Coach was trying to cut me from the team, he'd have to tell me to go. One of the girls who was moving up from JV, a seemingly nice one who wore glasses and smiled a lot, spoke up, telling Coach he'd only called 11 names. Coach tried to look surprised. He was a terrible actor. He made a production out of checking his clipboard and running his fingers down the list. Then he called the names of all 12 teammates. And this time my name was in its rightful spot. For whatever reason, maybe Brittany or Miss David had whispered lies about me to him. Coach was messing with me to let me know the score. He was my enemy too. Still, when I tell you my whole body unclenched, it was an understatement. I wasn't a great student. My mild case of dyslexia can make reading a chore, and I couldn't carry a tune or play an instrument or soar over track hurdles. Plus, I'm pretty sure being on palms was the only thing that kept me from being swept to the bottom rung of the social ladder at school. And it kept me out of the house every afternoon, which meant less time around my mother, who went from giddy to morose to mean in hours between lunch and dinner. Coach announced we were all going to Pizza Pizzella, where Brittany's mom was going to generously treat us all to dinner. Miss Davis stood up and waved like she was Miss America when he said that. Then Coach said we'd be elected this year's captain at dinner. I wanted nothing more than to dash into school and greedily gup from the water fountain. But I grabbed my backpack and headed to the parking lot along with everyone else. Brittany's mom announced she had room for 6 girls in her giant SUV that I'm pretty sure fit 8, and Coach said he could fit 5 in his pickup truck. Magic number 11 again. Go figure. I'm sure Brittany thought she screwed me over, but I didn't care that I was odd man out. Timmy was waiting for me, and I needed to drop him at home before I went to the restaurant. I pulled the keys to my Dodge Dart out of the inside pocket of my backpack, then slid behind the steering wheel and drove the half mile to the middle school. Timmy was on the front steps reading a comic book. When I tooted the horn, he looked up with a big smile. Timmy never complained about anything. He may have looked more like our mom, but on the inside, he was our dad. I asked how school was as he climbed into the back seat. Apparently, he got an extra tater tots at lunch, which was all it took to make his day a win. Those tater tots was good back in the day. Then I told him I had to go out, but that Dad would be home soon. His smile disappeared. I quickly said he could just hang out in the backyard until Dad got home. He told me he would and that he'd be really quiet. I glanced at Timmy's profile in the rearview mirror. In that moment, he seemed to be suspended between a kid who liked cartoons and someone much older. By the time we got to the house, my dad's car was in the driveway. I breathed out in relief and waved to Timmy as he slipped in through the kitchen door. I wanted to skip going for pizza, especially since I arrived 20 minutes late. But I already learned the hard way that any sign of retreat only emboldened Brittany. When I walked into the pizza restaurant, the girls were seated around a long rectangle table, with Coach Franklin at the head and Miss Davis to his right. Brittany was reigning over it all from a spot in the middle. I heard her laugh spill out as I approached. Brittany had piled her backpack and purse on the lone unoccupied chair. I knew she wouldn't move them until I asked at least twice. I was hot and tired and still so thirsty. The last thing I wanted to do was sit there for the next hour, faking a smile and enduring whatever else Brittany and her mom had cooked up for me. I felt my tears rise and I quickly blinked them away. Then I heard a low, soft voice asking if he could help me. I turned and found myself looking at a guy who was a little older than me, maybe 19. He was a dead ringer for James Spader, who starred in this movie called Sex, Lies, and Videotapes I seen a while back. Most of the girls in my class were obsessed with James Van Der Beek and Leonardo DiCaprio, but James Spader was my current crush. My mouth was probably hanging open as I stared at him. He moved closer, repeating himself a little more loudly as he asked again if he could help me. And I swear, Catherine, he did. That night, the waiter with kind eyes did more than help me. He saved me. Okay, that's the end of chapter 8. No, I mean 6. That's the end of chapter 6. It's not much to talk about with this chapter, but I know I got some questions. Maybe I'm gonna wait until the next chapters come, because she's now getting ready to talk about her past, right? And that chapter is kind of close to home, but that's neither here nor there. So I'm going to see you in the next chapter. See you in chapter 7. Bye.